really cool stuff. People are really, really big fans of your work, whether it's some of your DVDs or some other books that you've put out. We'll talk about some of that too. But the brand new one here, The Shift, it's ruffling some feathers, man. People are out there talking about it. They're going crazy because they know that when you put something out, the attention to detail that you have and just your style, people really gravitate towards it. So The Shift is here. People were very excited. And this actually sold out super quick the first time it came into Murphy's. We couldn't keep them, and now it's coming back. So that's why we're doing this, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And our aim was to ruffle some feathers, I think. So yeah, we're really, really super happy. The way the book turned out, the fact that people are really enjoying it, it's just super positive all around. Huge amounts of support from everyone, and it's just been great.
Now, before we jump into the specifics of the book, I want you to be able to take a moment. People may know your work, but there's so much more to you than just the material that you release. Like I know that you do a lot
There
of
really
stuff
isn't.
behind the scenes.
There really isn't. This
Whatever.
is it. This is
Whatever. So why don't we,
it's so shallow.
let's give the guys a chance to learn more about you if they don't know, because
Yeah.
like I said, they might know your work, but I don't think they probably know just how deep you are into the community. So why don't you kind of fill them in a little bit?
Do you know? I don't know exactly what you mean.
Well, you've had your
I have
hand. I
no idea.
mean, you've had your hands in TV stuff. You actually, at one point, were working on some TV show stuff for yourself. Like you've had a lot of
Right, I see.
attention on you in a lot of different ways, other than just releasing material. And I think sometimes people are a little bit
Right,
too
I
modest to say that.
right.
So that's all. Just thought you might want to.
Well, so yeah, I mean, look, I've been in magic since I was a teenager, and playing around with tricks like anyone else, absolutely obsessed with it, loving it. And then I never wanted to be a magician. Is the long and short of it. It just never occurred to me. It was just something I played with, and I found myself doing magic by accident, really. I found myself accidentally doing some gigs when I was younger, and then I started looking into a lot of kind of the background of it, the history and the psychology, and all of a sudden I was just getting pulled in to this kind of world and this community. And I went through a lot of different phases. I worked for a living as a worker, out there kind of gigging, doing all the kind of close-up gigs that you end up doing, weddings, bar openings, and all kinds of parties, all that type of stuff. But then over time, I suppose that I started really thinking about trying to find new challenges. I mean, that's always the thing I try and do, is try and just push myself. So I started writing. I started putting a lot of my material out there, as I knew a lot of magicians liked some of the stuff I was doing. I then started pushing into. I did the Penn and Teller show originally, and I did that when it was the first one in the world. It was just a one-off pilot. It was a backdoor pilot essentially, so no one really knew what to expect. And my only goal for doing that at that time was purely just to challenge myself doing the thing that I was doing. There was no ideas beyond that to do anything else, and I've kind of always approached everything in that way. And I think as a result, normally I can kind of look at a lot of opportunities with a bit of objectivity and balance. It's kind of served me well. And then from that, I ended up doing some TV stuff with Channel 4. That was a very strange experience. I think that part of the nature of that experience left me in a place where I wasn't really entirely happy with the kind of levels of control that I had in the process. So not that anyone's particularly to blame for that. If anyone is, it's myself. But I think that I then spent a few years thinking about what type of material that I really want to do. How do I want to express myself in magic? What makes me happy? And so I then went on a kind of a bit of a mission for a couple of years where I was teaching a lot, and writing and creating content, and I started doing some stuff with Vanishing Ink. I did a book, I did some DVDs, and in that process, I was really kind of trying to test the waters with exactly what I wanted to do in magic. And the reality is that I absolutely love magic, and I love learning, and I love teaching and communicating. I love performing. I love almost every single aspect of it.
Sounds like
So
it.
it's very difficult to just perform for me, or just write, or just produce. So I end up finding myself doing lots and lots of different things, and as a result, I end up meeting quite a lot of cool people in our industry. So I'm very, very lucky, really. I think more than anything else.
Sweet. Yeah, it is funny, isn't it? How magic is kind of like the anchor for a lot of us, but inside of that, there's so many talented people in the film industry that are TV. Like you just never know who you're going to find in there, and there's quite a few famous people that are
So,
kind of tiptoeing around the community too, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it's pretty rad.
and
Um,
I think also on top of that, there's a weird thing with a lot of people in magic where they always feel that they have to define what they are, what their character is, what performance stuff they're doing. And the fact of the matter is that it is such a rich and diverse set of ideas, material, and people that it can take a long time to discover what you like. And also, it's okay to like a wide variety of things. It's okay to love performing as much as it is to love writing or teaching. There's so many different parts to it. And I think that's the part that I've realized. I don't have to kind of settle on one thing.
mhm.
I can do lots of different things. I can try and do all of them as well as I can do them. And if I do those things that way, then it for whatever reason makes me happy.
Sweet. Well, you've definitely done a good job of that within the community itself. Specific to a deck of cards, you are known throughout the world, and I'm not blowing smoke. It's something that said a lot about you. Is that you are one of the finest? I don't like the word practitioner. You're just one of the best in the world. Technically, you are damn good with the deck of cards, and people are not shy to say that, me included. Your stuff speaks for itself, and the people that are, the people that we looked up to, they're now putting you up in the same levels as a lot of the greats. And so it's great when you're able to drop some of that onto the community and some of your different things. And the shift is your latest um, offering to the community, I would say,
Mm.
is the best way to put it. So knowing you and your background and knowing just how good you are, let's just beat around. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's just get right to it. How good you are, how damn good you are. The stuff in the book.
Mm.
What's the audience for it? I'd like to get into that because there's a lot of different people in the magic industry, like you just talked about, but also different skill levels. What's the audience for the shift? Like, who could really, or who were you speaking to when you decided to do this? I guess that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's a really good question. First of all, and plus your previous thing, thank you very much for
It's
the
true, man. I'm just
praise.
one of
But
I'm
but
one of many.
I have to say I literally can't do anything else. I can't do. There is nothing. I fail at most aspects in life. I can do this bit okay, and that makes me happy.
That's funny.
Anything else, I'm useless. But with the shift, really, it's been a labour of love, and it's been a really intense period of time with me thinking about exactly what I wanted to do and what I wanted to put into a book and why a book, who is it for? These are quite kind of profound questions, and the answers aren't that simple.
Mhm.
I think. So the way I look at it is this: I think to write material specifically for an audience, I think is tricky because sometimes information is only right for you when you're ready for it.
Oh,
And
well
sometimes
said.
you can have someone have the most perfect information for you. It's all the right answers, but you're just not in the right place to hear it.
Hmm.
And I know that because it's happened to me many times. I've had someone give me killer information, give me the answers to the questions I've been seeking, and I just wasn't ready to hear. So I think that I've always kind of been very, very aware of the fact that I don't want to bias something towards amateurs or experts or intermediate people and somehow exclude groups. So I've been very, very kind of careful to make sure that what I'm trying to do is write material that if you're ready for it, it will speak to you. So if you have someone that is been in magic for a year or so, I wouldn't say this is for the out of the gates beginner. You've got into magic today.
Hmm.
I would suggest there are probably other resources that I would recommend looking at first. But I think that if you've been in magic for a bit of time, there is material in this that will speak to you, down to the very way that you hold the deck of cards. There's a whole essay in this book about the fact that the way in which we hold the deck of cards, without even getting into technique, the way in which we hold it is already creating problems for us before we start anything else. And by making a tiny little change of just an angle, we can make everything else we do better. Now, to me, is that a tip that you give to someone who's new, or is that a tip you give to an expert? And to me, it kind of goes across both. And I think that a lot of the material in there is like that, where the ideas and the construction of the techniques can be appreciated by, anything from beginners, intermediate, up to experts.
Yeah.
That said, there is also a real bias towards construction and design of materials. So it's relatively simple in terms of its design, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's very easy to do. It just means that there's often fewer places for you to hide. So it means you have to think a bit more clearly through what you're doing. So I think that all in all, it's about simplicity and elegance of ideas, directness, and it's yeah. That's, without me waffling on, I think that's probably as clear as I can.
It's cool, and it's funny because when you first said that, even just reminding someone or throwing down a little advice on how to hold a deck of cards, and you said, "Is it just for beginners, or is it for beginners?" I shook my head no, because I'm like, no, everybody needs to know that 1,000%. I mean, for me, it even goes back to card college. What's the first thing you look at when you open the book? It's got the diagram of the hand. It's got, I mean, that's, if you don't know the basics, how are you going to get to where you need to go? Like, that's where it all starts. So,
Yeah, and there's a chapter in here on practice techniques.
love it.
It's called the art of practice, which is purely on how we practice. And again, that is something that goes from day one
Yeah.
all the way up to, if you consider yourself a master of the craft. These things are for everyone. So there really is an element of me where I want someone who is relatively kind of new to magic, I suppose, been in it a year or a couple of years or something. I want them to be able to pick up that book and really take stuff out of it and really treasure the information and value the information that's been given to them. And I also want the same for someone that I think is a seasoned professional. I think that if you start concentrating on the fundamentals of magic and concentrate on quality, I think that quality will end up speaking its way through to everyone. And that's really been the sole concentration for me, is just to continually focus on quality, not just material, but construction material, the way the book's laid out, design, how it's portable. It's every single thing about it is designed to do that. Whether I achieve that or not is secondary, but that's definitely the drive and the motivation behind it.
Cool. All right. Well, I mean, it's obvious through your work when you look at these small details in your work, the thinking that goes into even just the creation of a trick. You can tell that it's all very well thought out. So it's no surprise that it is also translated to the book itself. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah. The only thing I was going to say was, I mean, the whole this has really kind of come out of, I started up a company called Studio 52, which, and this is essentially, the shift is the first thing that we're offering. And really the company was designed pretty much for the same reason, which is to go, I want to exist in a space where all the things that I want to work on, whether it be a book, whether it be some other project, I can kind of fully put myself into and not have to compromise, which you end up having to do when you work with other people in other ways.
Right.
Not that's really a problem, but I think, if you really want to do what you want to do, then you kind of have to kind of build your own thing. So everything through the company has been put together in order to do that. And even very quickly, why it was a book in the first place.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a big thing for me, which is, I've had a lot of people saying, can we have some video clips or something? Stuff.
Sure.
And the thing is that those things may well come down the line, but there is a real value in reading a book, because with a book you have to invest, think, create, interpret, and imagine. And those things are really, really powerful when it comes to learning. And I think that all of those things are in there for that reason as well. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm old school, so I'm all about the books. There's a huge disconnect. Yeah. As much as people want to say I'm a visual learner, there's a big disconnect between watching something and reading it and processing it and kind of making it your own. Totally different. I mean,
you process the information differently, and it has a different value. I never look at it as a kind of better or worse. They complement each other really well.
Sure. No.
Watching stuff is great. Reading stuff is great. You learn different things. So yeah.
No. Now, when it comes to the actual material itself, why don't we kind of get into some of the specifics? There's a lot of different. I mentioned it to you before we went on this. I know there's like 3 different kind of main topics that you're including in the book. So why don't we kind of jump into what the variety here is, the type of material? Like we talked about kind of who it's for, the audience, but what's kind of inside the pages of this? Like what are people expecting to find when they open up the book for the shift here?
So the way the book is broken down is into 3 sections. So that's effects, then technique, and theory. And the reason is because I want, as you read the book, to read deeper into the process of magic. So for me, effects are the kind of the most superficial element. They're the veneer. They're just a bit on the outside. Underneath that are the techniques, are the things that allow you to achieve those effects. And then underneath that is theory. And that's kind of like the bedrock on which everything rests. And so I want, as you read into the book, for you to read deeper into magic. But all of those things have to be practical and applied to me. So I want the effects to be practical and workable in the real world. I want the techniques not to be something that only works when you're sitting 10 feet away with one eye closed on a cushion, looking at it from a certain angle. I want that effect to work in the real world. And the theory, again, has to be practically applied. If you cannot apply the theory directly, then it's of very little value to me. It only has value if it can be applied. So awesome. All of that stuff has to work. And so the design also helps that. So as you read through the book, the color gradient gets darker. The space, as you read down, the sections actually get lower in terms of the location. So the whole thing is designed to kind of draw you in. Nice. In terms of material, currently, I mean, there's going to be a mixture of close-up cards and coins. There'll be some gambling stuff. There'll be all kinds of things like that will end up being in the Shift and subsequent volumes of the Shift. But this very first issue has a 2-card transposition, a very, very clean and powerful 2-card transposition. It has a version of kind of out of this world that meets oil and water. It's very difficult for me to kind of extrapolate them, and you'll see why. But again, a very, very clean, very powerful version of that. And another, a stop trick, the classic kind of deal the cards and say stop. Cool. So they're kind of, in a way, very, very classic, clean ideas, a transposition, an out of this world and a stop trick. But hopefully the construction of them and the way in which I go through trying to describe why the effects are being used, why the techniques are being used, you might learn something beyond the tricks themselves. So for me, my process is always to use tricks as Trojan horses to smuggle deeper ideas.
That's
so I think
great.
That, like all of these things are based on many other ideas. I think that the idea for me, I always want it to be bigger than the trick, because the trick is, if I can take that idea and I can use it in other spaces, to me, that's very valuable. So I'm hoping that not only will people get some killer magic that they can actually use in the real world that's been tried and tested, but from that, it might start sparking ideas and stimulate further thoughts for them. And it's exactly the same with the techniques and the theory. It's just the same type of process.
Cool. I know you sparked a lot of people with your other book, which I'm going to throw a little picture up here on the screen. This has been a very, very popular book. Less is more. You talk about going into really detailed stuff and a lot of theory, a lot of thinking. People think, oh, Ben Earl, card guy, but I mean, okay, but the theory is what sets him apart from just being a card guy. It's kind of like this Tamarice type of world that you're living in when you read through a Ben Earl book. It's filled with great magic, obviously, and technique, but obviously the theory that's behind it, he's kind of showing you why he does what he does, and then you can apply it to your own stuff, which I think that's the huge disconnect too these days, man, is that people buy a trick and they just buy the trick and they just do it. And I know a trick in a book or learning from a book or DVD is different than just buying a trick, but I feel like people aren't looking at the detailed stuff, and that's what I love about books too. It really does have you understand the why, and then you can start to make it your own. When you read through a book and stuff. So, I'm just,
to me, that's where the value is. That's where the true value in a magic effect is how and why it's working. I always felt I got more value when I understood the reasons for the construction behind the magic, and so really what I'm most of the time doing is I'm writing material in the way that I want to read it. I mean, it's very easy for me to do as a result. I just think this is the information that I value, and this is the thought process that's behind this. So even though some people might not care and they might just want to go straight to the end point, there's going to be other people that will appreciate that, and that's valuable to me. I mean, talking of less is more, that book is really a book on philosophy. It's a book which was, for me, to take one position, which is how can you take 4 aces, and it was just a mini series that I wanted to write initially. How can you take 4 aces and from that expand a huge variety of ideas, effects, and concepts from the same position? So it's not even just 4 aces and all the different setups, but can you have 4 aces in the same position and do a massive wide variety of ideas, techniques, and styles. And in doing so, what does that mean you have to think about? What does that mean you have to think about in terms of construction? And what does that mean you have to think about in terms of the objective experience of a layman, of an audience member? Now, in doing that, I have to, it has to be with a spoonful of sugar. You have to give examples of that. So the book was very much about showing you how you can take a trick and evolve it with simplicity, how you can take an extremely minimal situation and use it to improvise and create realism. So there was a huge variety. Now, there were problems with it. So the problem I had was that I wanted to create this kind of minimalist book, but the problem I felt was where it was just full of loads of black and white photography and very minimalist, which in my brain went very much with the idea.
Right.
I felt that in looking at it, it becomes hard to read because you can get very tired eyes. So it's the opposite of what I've done with the Shift. So what I've done with the Shift is we have used full color photographs, and we've also alternated the color of the decks and the design of the decks through each trick. So each trick that you read, the first deck will be blue and it's a circle back. The second one is red and it's Jerry's Nuggets. The next one is blue and it's, I can't remember off the top of my head, Arco, I think. So what it means is that every single effect that you go into, you've got a new visual palette to deal with. So there was, a huge amount of time and effort and attention to detail was spent in trying to help the learning experience for the individual without necessarily compromising any of the content. Why I think like this or why I care about this stuff, I don't really know. I think, like I said, I think it's just purely that I'm trying to often create material for that teenage version of me that
cool.
was trying to read certain things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just really happy that people seem to love what I do. I don't try to do stuff that people like. I just try to do my own stuff, and I think it makes it that much more valuable when people like it, because it really is an expression of how I think about stuff. And if someone likes it, great. If they don't, great. But when they do, it does make it that much more kind of rewarding, I think, because it feels like me.
Yeah, I will also give you a little love there, because you mentioned something that really kind of struck a chord with me, which was that you wanted to kind of write a book for the teenage version of you. Well, I think I'm a little bit older than you, but when we were younger, that's kind of all we had were like the greats. We didn't have the access to the digital medium. It wasn't cheap to produce a VHS tape or series. So when a book or something came out, it was like really, really good stuff. And now the type of stuff you're talking about is less and less. So for you to want to offer something kind of to pay homage to how you got into this or how you felt like you learned best and pass that to the next generation, I think that's badass. So I'm a big fan of that. And I had no idea that the thinking went that deep. Am I surprised? No, but that's cool. That's really cool, because we need more of that in the community. I 100% believe that. Yeah.
Thank you, man. I mean, it goes even weirder. Like even it goes more mental. Trust me. So it took me 4 months to decide on the font, and I eventually went with a font that was originally a British-based public service font that was used for the BBC and the London Underground, purely because it was public service. So it felt like if I can use a font which represent the form of public service, it's craziness that no one's ever going to pick up on. But it was just it's just madness. But in point to what you said, I completely agree. I feel so incredibly lucky to have grown up in the era that I did. I was kind of surrounded by, here's a list of my inspirations, the first people I kind of was hit by, right? So people like Jerry Sadowitz, Darren Brown, Ricky Jay, Steve Forte, David Blaine, they were all kind of early people that I was very much looking at. And then outside of all the other names that I could get, like Goshman and Marlowe and Vernon, all this stuff was the only stuff I could consume. Yeah. So the only stuff I could consume were these monsters
of good stuff,
thinking or amazing. And I had to go on journeys. I remember once looking for something, and I was sent on this massive journey to go and read Epilogue, just to find this shuffle technique. I had to consume the whole of Epilogue, and it wasn't in there. And it's like, I felt at the time, oh, that's terrible. But really, I'd consumed all this other stuff. And so I think that there are some benefits of people in the modern world because they have a huge variety of choice at their fingertips. But as a result of that, there's also a real dilution which occurs, and it's very difficult for people to know where to turn. So I think for me, the whole thing that I want to do with Studio 52, and the shift is just the first kind of offering in book form of that, is to try and really push forward. It's not even about me. It's about trying to really put information and ideas out there that creates that guy that right now is 10 years old, right? He's 10 years old right now, but he is going to be the next badass in 30 years time. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
he's going to be better than all of us. And it's like, that guy might pick up this type of stuff. And I think that for me, that in itself is worth doing it for.
Love it. So I think the one big thing to take away from this, guys, is if you weren't already keeping an eye on Ben Earl when he puts stuff out, this is even more reason to, because there's like this lineage of goodness that follows him wherever he goes. So there you go. It's fun, man. This is like, this is like the real work. This is the deep stuff. And, we are from a different generation. Like you and I together are from a different generation than most of the people around this stuff now. And those were, in my eyes, the good times. Are things cool now? Yeah.
We're like day walkers. We're halfway. We're not of that great generation, and we're not of this young one with his strange hybrid creatures.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was looking at, I had one other kind of question for you, since we're kind of getting to know you better through this, which is kind of fun too, to be honest with you. With this book in particular, is there a favorite? Because I know there's different things included. There's theory, there's technique, there's effects. Is there a specific, I'll break this up into two parts. Is there a specific trick, effect, or a specific thing, whether it's a thought, a theory, and you don't have to tell what it is, but is there like a specific thing in there that is your favorite from the shift? Is there something in there you're just like, yeah, I love that?
Okay, so I could obviously answer in a way of saying there's lots of stuff in there, and I could, but let's say I have to pick on pain of death. Well, I would probably say there are four things. No, I'd probably say the final chapter is a chapter on influence and deception.
Oh, cool.
And it's I've been very lucky to have worked for the last kind of 10 years with some very special people that work within UK military and government within influence and deception. And so I've kind of been privileged to a lot of very cool information over the last 10 years with psychology, deception in general, magic. And I've become very good friends with one of the main guys who is, in my opinion, it almost isn't really opinion. He's pretty much the world's leading authority on influence and deception.
Oh, wow.
And I managed to convince him to write stuff for the shift, which has not only not ever appeared in the magic world, it's never appeared anywhere. So this is kind of a world exclusive in terms of what deception and influence really are, how they differ from magic. And there's going to be a long going series where I start talking about that stuff in much more detail, because the terms are used interchangeably amongst magicians, and they don't really understand where deception is or isn't magic, and what it means, and how much more information there is out in the world for us to kind of dig into, other domains of interest where we can pull amazing stuff from. And I think that for me makes the book very, very special, which I'm incredibly proud that Simon agreed to actually put offer up these essays. I suppose on a kind of secondary tier, the fact that it's got practice material in it, or unique ways of practicing, which I've been doing. I grew up playing a lot of sport, and so I would do all kinds of practice drills that involved restriction and overload, and I started practicing magic that way, and I just assumed that's how magicians practice. And I think that when magicians would say to me, like, how did you get that technique looking that way? Or I just say, well, practice. And it's only over years where I realized that magicians were just basically sitting down repetitively doing the move over and over again. Yeah. But I was like, okay, these practice drills are things that really could help other magicians. So cool. That's kind of, those two things I think make it very unique. In terms of effect, it's hard for me to say. I suppose I love the absolute directness of the out of this world that's in there. Okay. It's kind of so direct that in first reading, it might be hard to kind of immediately understand how it will work. But it's even though it's relatively easy to do, but it's tried and tested, and it's one of my favorite things to do.
Cool.
Yeah, but yeah,
Sweet. Yeah, a
nice
lot
stuff.
of. I love the variety of your answer too, because it's not just oh yeah this trick, this trick. Nah, it's like I love how you put the other stuff first, and I love the fact that you're going to include that as you kind of go forward too, like dropping those little things in there. That's cool. And
Well,
also, oh, go ahead.
no, no, I think the only other slight thing I was going to say, I think that nowadays when it comes to selling magic, everything sells the effects. You know, this
Uh,
is easy to do. This is a killer version of this. Again, my problem is that I think that some of those effects are for certain people, and
mhm.
others aren't, and it's very difficult to say that. And I've been guilty of saying some of that stuff in the past. You know, this effect is the best effect, because it's what else do you do? And I think I was very conscious with excuse me, with the shift to actually try not to. And if you think about it, we haven't really overly solved the content. We've not massively gone into exactly what's in there. And I think that's part of we said what's in there. It's there for you to look at, but I don't want to oversell it to people. And I mean I've had constant arguments with with friends of mine about the value of doing that. But I think that ultimately, what I really want is I want the value of the material to speak for itself. And
Sweet.
I hope that it ends up doing that. You know, I may be wrong. Maybe you do have to tell people, but we'll see. You know.
Oh, I mean, you've got quite the track record that speaks for itself. So I think that's a good place to start for sure. Speaking of your stuff, there's one other project I wanted to mention because it's one of my favorites, to be honest with you, and it's the Real Dex Switches DVD that you put out. For me, that's something that it's kind of like when people hear the word palming or they hear the word maybe pass, they kind of get intimidated by it. And I think Dex Switch maybe not as intense, but it kind of has this like scary, you know,
Yeah.
kind of stigma around it. And you've got a nice variety of those in or on that project, I should say, not because it's not a book, but that is something too that I think that if people are looking to add maybe some gimmick stuff or a stack deck or you want to get something in and out of play, that is a great resource too. And Ben breaks some stuff down that's not exactly like too hard to do, and then he includes some stuff that's a little more knuckle busting, but he's got something for everybody on there. So I wanted to personally bring that one up because it's one of my favorite things from you because I do appreciate and love deck switches and the thinking, the psychology behind those too, and of course the technique that goes into some of them too.
Yeah, I think it was a nice project to do, and I did a number of projects with Vanishing Ink, which were
Yeah,
different style projects for me. They were like one-off little things, little pops, which again more designed towards kind of selling certain things towards customers rather than or their customers rather than kind of me kind of purposely pursuing what I love and
mm-hmm.
what I want to do. Hence the reason why I've now kind of moved away from Vanishing Ink and started my own company and started doing
That's
my own
fair.
thing.
Yeah,
Still love those guys; they're all great, but you know, so I just need to do some different stuff. But the deck switches was an interesting project because again, it's like a lot of things like passes, palms,
mm-hmm.
deck switches, even top changes. Fundamentally, I think yes, there is technique, but fundamentally they're about timing and
Sure.
movement. And there is a lot to do with your movement of your body in space and the timing of your actions, um, which are very difficult to describe to people. And I think it's those are the things that people often get very scared about.
Mm-hmm.
These bold type moves, and I find them fascinating because it's
Yeah,
a really rich area for construction, psychology, movement, and deck switches is a great way to kind of show how even something that happens in a small space can also be a kind of like a melting pot of all of those ideas. You know,
oh yeah,
so.
yeah. And you put it all into action. That's what's fun. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
doing
that's
that
fine.
kind of stuff.
Also, I stopped using them because I was using them on magicians for a long time. When like I'd be at a convention, I would just be sitting at a table. I would just like spread a deck and do this stuff, and no one really knew I was doing deck switches. And so many of these switches just came out of playing with them, playing with different ways of doing it, and needing to have to do it in the most awkward environment. If you're going to do it in your pocket, it's one of the best ways to do it on the planet. If you can do it in your pocket or do it covered,
Yeah,
do it 100%. But the awkward one is when there's a deck on the table and you think, oh, it'd be so perfect if I could just switch that right now. Like that. And so from that grew so many different ideas and switches. But eventually I stopped doing kind of stack deck work in the same way that I was at that point in time. And so as a result, they just became less useful to me. And I felt that, well, there's a lot of people out there that still do a lot of stat work and a lot of stuff that this would be useful for.
Yeah.
So now it's got more value to me that other people have it than anything else.
Sweet.
So again, it's the same type of justification.
Very cool. Yeah. I know it's not specific to this book, but it's, again, something I think people, if they haven't seen that too, I think, there you go. You can have your Ben Earl Dex switches on DVD on. You can have your shift book. You have Ben Earl Overload. It's all good. Trust me, you'll be better for it too at the end of the day.
I won't be. I'm sick of the guy. Trust me. I have too much. He's everywhere. So, yeah.
That's right.
Oh.
Cool. Well, brother, I'm gonna let you get out of here. I wanted to also, of course, say thank you. Ben's joining me from the UK. He's on the other side of the pond. But I also want to give a huge congrats, man. I know not only the debut of the book, but the undergoing that it takes to start up a new company, even get the idea for it and to go for it. Like that takes a lot of balls too. So, shouts to you and Henry over there. You guys, and yeah, if you want to give some love to the company, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, Henry's a general manager, and he's excellent at kind of running all the day-to-day stuff, and also he kind of works through everything with me. So like even with the book, like I'll then say, Henry, have a look over this, or he'll go through it. We'll talk through design ideas, and he's a perfect person for me to kind of bounce ideas off of. Plus it makes me laugh. So I think I'm very lucky. There's still a lot of work ahead. There's still a lot for us to do, and we've got some very big and ambitious plans. But ultimately, outside of all the hard work, I think that I just want to continue to pursue things that I love. And if I can give that something of value to other people, if I can really contribute to the art of magic beyond just sales, beyond just it being successful, whatever that means,
sure.
If I can somehow contribute to it in a way that's slightly more, I have kids, and it's like, it's a weird thing. I think a lot of things changed for me when I had them, and I felt that, if they come to me in a few years' time and say, look, what is it you do? And I say, well, I built this, I made this, and I contributed this to this art form. Not that they'll care, but I think that there's something about maybe doing something in that area that felt more meaningful to me than just receiving claps.
Sure.
So, and again, not there's anything wrong with that, but for whatever reason, that was starting to drive me. And this company and the Shift are, so Studio 52 and the Shift are the kind of the beginnings of that more than anything else. And
sweet.
So yeah.
All right. Well, can't wait to see what else you guys end up doing over the next years. This is just the beginning, and I will
Hopefully.
definitely agree that having kids changes your perspective on a lot of things. I've got a 10-year-old, and yeah, it makes you really take a look at yourself and the legacy and everything, and yeah. So I respect that even more now, knowing that that's kind of at the bottom of some of this, kind of inspiring you, to leave the Ben Earl legacy. That's cool.
I mean, I say that I haven't seen them in 4 years, but no, it's not. I'm a good dad, I promise. Yeah, no, it does. It changes a lot. It changes a lot. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on and making this process so easy. It's been great.
Well, this went longer than I thought it would, but I mean, that's what happens when you have good stuff to talk about. So there you go.
That's great.
Sweet. All right, brother.
All right.
I will throw back to I'll throw back to Luke. Okay, get back to your live stuff. Do it. All right.